Well, hello everybody. I'm Mrs. Pound and welcome back to chapter 1.2. We finally made it. This is the last section in this chapter. And last time we talked about physical changes. That's when we have the same substance through a change. Whatever we start with, we also end with. This time in section 1.2.7, we're going to talk about chemical changes. So our objectives are going to be to contrast chemical changes with physical changes, describe types of chemical changes, and to identify the evidence of chemical changes. So here we go. A chemical change is a change that occurs when a substance changes into an entirely different substance with different properties. So last time with physical changes, if we started with water, we ended with water. This time with chemical changes, if we start with water, we end up with, say, hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. So one example of a chemical change is combustion, the burning of substances. And as we can see from this picture, with combustion, oftentimes heat is released and light. So light and heat are evidence of a chemical reaction. There's also oxidation. This is a chemical change in which a substance combines with oxygen, and an example would be rust. And also with this chemical change here, we can see that there is a color change because we know that iron tends to be kind of silver colored and shiny or even kind of blackish. Okay, well, steel is silvery. Iron is kind of blackish, but when it rusts, it turns a reddish brown color. So evidence of chemical change is a color change like in oxidation. So do new substances form during a chemical change? Yes, they do. Now let's look at this one. If baking soda and vinegar react to make carbon dioxide gas, is there less matter when the reaction is done, and why? Now, just think about this too. Baking soda and vinegar, when they react, they make bubbles. So another form of evidence for a chemical reaction is the formation of bubbles. We have to be careful though, because when we boil something, there's also bubbles. Okay, so we have to be a little careful there. And boiling is not a chemical reaction. Also, I'm going to do this reaction for you in class. Sometimes when we put two chemicals together, it actually cools the substance. That's called an endothermic reaction. When it feels cooler, it absorbs energy. Exothermic is like combustion where heat is given off. So with baking soda and vinegar, some evidence are bubbles and the fact that it feels cooler. The answer is no. The law of conservation of mass states that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. There may be less matter in the container, but the molecules have regrouped in the chemical change and are now in the air. All those bubbles that are released from that reaction, the carbon dioxide is released into the air. And we actually captured that in lab the other day, didn't we? Now, let's identify the following changes as either chemical or physical. So this is a little bit of review. So dissolving, when we dissolve a substance, is that a chemical or a physical change? Do we end up with something new or do we still have what we started with? It is a physical change because when we dissolve something, let's say we're dissolving sugar in water like in that drink. When we dissolve sugar in the water, we still have sugar in water. We just have sugar water. How about rusting? That is a chemical change. That is our oxidation. We end up with a new substance. We started out with iron. We end up with iron oxide, which is a different chemical, a different substance. And it's a different color. Burning. We said earlier that that is combustion, which is a chemical change. We end up with new substances, and we also see that heat is released and light, which are evidence of chemical reactions. Now, with burning, carbon dioxide and water are released. Sublimation. With sublimation, that's a physical change. As we covered in the last section, dry ice sublimates. That is solid carbon dioxide. It goes directly to gaseous carbon dioxide. A color change, like with these hydrangea that can detect pH. That is a chemical change. When we have color changes, those are evidence of chemical change because new substances are a new color. Bubble formation. You can kind of see the bubbles in the background in those test tubes. That is chemical change. Just like baking soda and vinegar, when we have bubble formation, it's evidence of a chemical change, but you do have to be careful that it's not boiling. Melting. That is a physical change. The ice cream in the background, even when it melts, it's still ice cream. It's still the cream and the sugar and the flavoring. It hasn't changed to anything new. And vaporization. That's a physical change because with that tea, that cup of tea, that is the water that is vaporizing, and we still have water vapor after it vaporizes. So our objectives for today were to contrast chemical changes with physical changes, describe types of chemical changes, and identify the evidence of chemical changes. So now you should come up with your 5 questions, and don't forget, we're done with this chapter. So that doesn't mean you should just wait till we do Quizlet and everything to start studying. You should start studying now, going over your notes and reviewing them before we even do Quizlet and all of that.